I'm probably best known for the writing that I do on Forbes, and I'm not sure I agree with your description. What I really do is just I found a way to get a job playing with my kids, right? If I write about it, then someone will pay me. Uh, but really, I'm just trying to play with my kids as much as I can. Um, I want to. Both of you were so great. Your openings, and you talked a lot about the physical, the emotional, the social, and benefits of play. But I want to also talk about the intellectual benefits because I'm not. I want to make sure we really get that out there. That freedom of mind, right? This idea that you get to play, and that gives human dignity, right? How do we create these places where people have the freedom to play with things? You know. Last week, the White House did, they called it Bridging the Gap conference, which was about the word gap. I'm sure many of you know about the word gap and that affluent families, kids have so many more words by the time they're 3 than lower income families. And then there was a study that was announced at this conference about how it was not the quantity, it was the quality. It was about the metaphors and the fluency of the conversation and the rituals around conversation. And all I kept hearing was, oh, it's about the ability to play with words, right? And Daryl, I was thinking about you as I was thinking about this because I thought, you know, this is, I mean, how can you play with words if you don't even get to play with sand, right? So this is about a lot more than just physical, emotional, social. It's also giving people the freedom to have autonomy in their lives and dignity in their lives, and that's why I'm such a big supporter of Kaboom. You know, I mean, I love everything else, but I don't know much about all this, all the other infrastructural and economic stuff. But you guys are going to explain it to me now. First, why don't you all introduce yourselves? But make sure when you introduce yourselves, you don't just tell us what you do for work. Also, tell us what you do for play, right? And I don't know. We can go this way.
I think everyone knows me. I was the one that was choking on without water up here. What I do for play, I have 2 children. One's in 10th grade and one's now a freshman in college. So they keep me very active in that. And we're active on the outdoors. We sail a lot. We're active sailors as a family. And then the second thing I do is I bike and run, and that keeps me active.
I also just want to say something I forgot about Bruce. We go to a lot of community events and community activities, and there's generally a business representative there, but not the corporate CEO. And I think it says and speaks a lot to your company and to you to actually show up and participate and actually be here. So I don't want that thought to be lost. And I also want to recognize the other gentleman over here, Ben Heck, who actually happened to be Kaboom's first funder 18 years ago. And he's still a dear personal friend and professional friend. And I've learned as much about what the iteration that we're trying to do from him than probably anybody else. So my play is intellectual stimulation. I'm not satisfied with the kind of status quo. And so I both try to exercise my body and my mind in trying to solve this problem on the scale it exists.
Good morning. I'm Mayor Kim Bracey from the city of York in Pennsylvania. I'm the mayor. I play. So we try to incorporate play in most everything that we do. I personally have tried to ride a motorcycle last year this time and ended up in a cast. Yeah. So you remember that, Ben? Okay. So there's some things you shouldn't do. But it's all about play. It's all about being active. And I'm going to share more of that, too, some of the things that we do in our community to encourage people to do just that, including taking motorcycle lessons as well, too. But we try to do it in every area. Our city government, all departments working together, working with our private organizations as well as those that do the same thing as we as well in the public area. So lots of fun happening in the city of York right now. We have a team here as well. Why did that go silent? Okay. Okay, good. So thank you.
Great. My name is Ben Hecht, and I don't know if this is on, but it's close enough. Hi, 3. Awesome. That's responsive. So I'm the president and CEO of Living Cities, and we're a 22-year-old collaboration of 23 of the world's leading foundations and financial institutions that have invested for all those years in creating economic opportunities for low-income people in America's cities. And what do I do for play? So I was thinking as I was walking across O'Hare Airport, I think just walking through airports is actually a big part, maybe for you too. It's a big part of my exercise, but I'm also a runner. And I'd say, because I do spend a lot of time in cities, one of the best ways that I play is just walking around places that most people don't walk around to see how real people live and play.
Thank you all. So it occurs to me as you're answering that one of you should have told me it was a horrible question because part of what we're talking about here is playability, and that means we shouldn't have this divide between what we do for work and what we do for play. They shouldn't be separate. So, in fact, I'm going to turn it first to you, Daryl. Can you kind of unpack this playability idea? I mean, you did it a little bit in your opening, but let's get kind of practical. What about, besides the bus stop you showed us, what is playability when you talk about it?
Well, I mean, as we define it as, playability is cities making it easy for kids to get the active and balanced play they need to be able to thrive. And we've really done a lot of research on walking and biking. And we know that walking and biking has taken generations to actually scale up to finally get to where we're at. And what we're trying to do is to accelerate the pace of what the walking and biking movement has done to a decade. And in that decade, get to a level of both scale and equity so that we're not leaving people behind, like the bike racks, the bike example in Washington, D.C., where there's 71 miles of bike lanes, but none where kids actually live and the low-income community lives. And we think that because of this behavioral science research that we've done, which there's handouts and you're going to hear more about tomorrow, we have to be smarter about trying to solve the problem. And for a long time, we thought that the solution simply was build more playgrounds. And that may not be the case if they're not better playgrounds and if kids aren't playing at all. And how do you do that so that the 16 million kids benefit without going another generation where some benefit because of episodic pilots and not everybody benefits? So we've pivoted our approach to saying a playground is nice, but the whole city has to be playable because that's what we heard from kids. Yesterday, as an example, we were painting sidewalk chalk out in front to welcome you. And one of our members, Kelly, had done hopscotch. And it was after school, and a young girl had come by with her dad, and she started to walk by, and she said, "Can I do it?" And we're like, "Absolutely." And she did it. But the funny thing was, we were all looking, and 2 and 3 blocks later, she was still hopscotching.
Right.
And the point being is that as we've learned, a playground is a barrier because it's a place, it's a box. But if we can make play happen everywhere, it creates that to be the default behavior.
Can I add something to that? Because I think there was what was the phrase you had in your slide about the routine? Something about challenging the routine or
Rethinking routine?
Rethinking routine, and which is a great phrase because I actually think that's really what it's about. It's like, how do you take the routines that everyone has and say, how do we make play part of the routine? And it's not about the place, it's about the routine. But I think what that means is the way you look at a place and think about people's routines has to change. And so I think, anybody here from Cleveland? Awesome, I can make this up then. This is perfect. So in Cleveland, there's a neighborhood that actually was quite challenged called Detroit Shoreway. And I've worked in Cleveland for years, and it was always viewed as a place that nobody wanted to live, and then they realized Detroit Shoreway is on the lake, and who doesn't want to live at the lake? And then if you live near the lake, you want to walk and run by the lake, or you want to ride your bikes by the lake. And so then they built a bike path or a path in the Detroit Shoreway neighborhood on the lake. And you might imagine people from other communities come to go on the bike path on the Detroit Shoreway neighborhood. It became the routine and actually a destination for others to come, which gets to the community, it gets to the connectiveness. And then what people do on that bike path is actually more than just biking. You know, they're doing all kinds of things, which gets to the creativity. And so I think that is the question of how do I relook at the way I solve problems and say, can we solve in a way that is actually going to change the routine, not ask people to create a new routine that's going to respond to your new thing you built or like that.
Yeah, this brings up what you were talking about, Bruce. This idea of just the community idea. And I was thinking when you mentioned Jane Jacobs, Daryl. You know, Jane Jacobs told us a long time ago that if you have these boxes, they're just going to become places to do drugs, right? So this idea that you bring the community together through the process. What does that look like in York, Mayor Bracy?
Yeah, I think while we want to have play everywhere, we do have 25 great parks in the city of York that all need a little love. And some of them have gotten more love than others because of a great organization we call Bring On Play, which is an organization of volunteers who make their business to revitalize our parks, provide equipment, updated our equipment, and work with the city and other private organizations such as the YMCA. Kaboom actually has done one of ours with us. But the idea is we bring in the community residents, the neighborhood, to ask them what they want. We've gone into the schools in that surrounding area, in different parts of where the parks are at, to work with the kids and ask them, design what you want to see in this park that's going to be in your neighborhood. Have them take accountability and be part of the process. You'll find a positive end at the results at the end. So we've been able to do that. We're working slowly to get through the 25 parks, as of course cities are strapped and we don't always have the resources, but with those partnerships and again, hearing from the residents that live in those areas, it becomes an area where people want to live, where they'll take care of, and the kids feel like they have a vested interest as well. So those are slow, but progress that we are making in the city.
Now, you were really emphasizing the public-private partnership and making that happen. Can you unpack that a little bit, what that really needs to look like?
Yeah, I think a few things there. First, I do think that you have to find the win-win. I emphasize that on a few ways, and that win-win creates sustainability in partnerships. Anyone can sort of feel good and write a check, but you really need to find how you find those areas where there's commonality and advancement of both sides. For us as an organization, we primarily serve a lot of under-resourced communities. We have a large number of people on the exchanges, about 1 million. We have about 3 million members that are in a program called Medicare Advantage. That's average income's about $20,000. And then we have about 5 states that we support the entire Medicaid system. And so we have a lot of under-resourced individuals that we are supporting. Our biggest barrier to health is their lifestyle, is the community they live in, their thought process and all the aspects. We can manage the healthcare delivery system. We can decide what's the right treatment. We can work with doctors on alignment of incentives. The challenge we have in our organization is how do you help the community advance? And what's ironic is our definition of progression is really, I think, regression. Progression of technology, progression of big boxes, progression of communities that are sort of silos and have set back the United States as opposed to progressed. And the reason why I believe that is because look at our health. I look at the day, if I do not force myself to exercise, I get 2,000 steps because of all the conveniences that are in my lifestyle. And then if I have all the fortunate access to where I can walk on safe streets, I'm close to parks and those, but under-resourced areas don't have that. So they have the combination of 2 problems. They don't have the access to the resources, and then secondarily, they have the access to conveniences. I was telling Daryl a story. We have a big population of members in San Antonio. We did a study, and within 2 to 4 minutes, there was a fast food restaurant that the individuals could get to. To get to a grocery store that had healthy foods is 10 to 15 minutes. And so if you think about convenience, we've made it convenient for them to get bad food, but we haven't made it convenient for them to be healthy. And so for us, we're trying to lower those barriers to make it convenient.
Yeah. I mean, we've all emphasized convenient. Daryl, can you talk? I mean, you showed the bus stops. Talk about some of the other ways in other cities that with simple solutions makes play more convenient.
Well, I mean, I think we've seen the Play Streets program where people are actually shutting down streets and getting people outside and creating critical mass. We're looking at Brownsville, Texas, that has this great cyclovia program that they're copying from LA and making better. I look at the biggest barrier, I think, when it comes to cities and public-private partnerships is we think that it's all about money. And actually, I'll challenge Ben because Ben said the money's actually there. It just may not be being spent very well. And so I think as we talk about the discussion the next couple of days, some of the best solutions may be the free solutions like the sidewalk chalk. And imagine if a whole city had sidewalk chalk everywhere, and that got people out and about. So you have both the activity of doing the action, and then you have the result of the action that's happening. And you could probably get more resources down the road if there's actually an appetite for this. But what we're hearing from cities across the country is we can't invest in parks because people aren't going to them in the first place.
Right. Let me just say something. So my office is a couple blocks from Times Square in New York. And most people at least have seen pictures of Times Square, right? You don't necessarily think of that as a play capital of America. But actually, a number of years ago, under Mayor Bloomberg, one of the heads of his agencies went out one night with a can of green paint, like $5.99 at the local Home Depot, and basically built a bike path, walk path, and kind of closed off Times Square with a couple of cans of paint. And it transformed. Of course, now you go there and it's much more formal, but it really was started with a couple of cans of paint and the willingness to lead, which does get to the other issue. And about, maybe it was last year or a year and a half ago, I came out of a meeting, again, we're outside of Times Square, and I walk out, and there's like 2,000 people doing yoga in Times Square. And it was like 100 degrees outside. It was crazy. But, you take this place, which isn't necessarily a place you would traditionally believe yoga is taking place, and there's people from all over the world who came to do yoga in Times Square on the big Jumbotron. But it's this kind of thinking which says, how do we take the routine and do something different with it? And people from all over come, and because it's different, it's fun, and it's a way to actually, for very little money, change the way people view how they live.
And I would just want to add what we learned from Gabe Klein, who interestingly was the person who did the bike lanes first in Washington, D.C., and then here in Chicago. And he said in Washington, D.C., the way he got it off the ground was to put it right down Pennsylvania Avenue. He said we chose the hardest area, the most difficult, the most politically charged. Instead of going to a neighborhood where it was going to be easy and we knew it was going to be successful, it wasn't necessarily going to be replicable nor visible. And so when we look at these episodic things, it's how do we choose the signals that it's the hardest places that get you the biggest benefit, that what you really do learn from becomes replicable and scalable in other areas versus the easy things that may not be as replicable or scalable in the type of neighborhoods that we think can benefit from this most.
Yeah. I have a lot more questions, but I also know we're running low on time, and I want to give you all a chance to ask questions. So let's do that. Who's got questions?
Yeah, we can hear you.
You can hear me. Great. I'd like to dig I've had a button push. I'm an architect and design playground equipment. So one of the things I like to
Ooh.
more about is when you guys say the box and say barrier, I get really concerned because I definitely believe in playability around, and I love the idea of playability in all those places that kids are stuck, like at the laundry or at the bus stop or wherever. But on the other hand, I want to be very sure that the words barrier and box seem very negative to me. And in my world, or my thinking, the play space is the only space that is designed 100% for kids. office work and their other facilities. That's the same as a playground. Yes, we could play anywhere we want, but the benefit of having an actual place where people come there and it's designed for children, I just want to make sure
Yeah,
that's not getting lost in the...
Michael, I think that's a very good point around semantics. We have to talk about not either ors, but ands.
Exactly, thank you.
And it's not either the playground or play everywhere. It's and how do we make the playground better? So thank you for reminding us of that. And frankly, Michael, people should know how brilliant you are in embracing this concept for many years, coming from Denmark and Compan, and bringing it to the United States and being a thought partner with our organization for the last 2 years. Interestingly enough, in the playground industry, until Michael came, they would take playground equipment and then think that that's what kids actually wanted. And then they would take it to the buyers, park and rec departments, and say, would you buy this? And Michael, a year ago, invited some of us up from Kaboom to actually kid test some new concepts. And so that's the type of thinking that the industry is starting to change, which is if the kids aren't going to use it and it's not going to be fun to them, we shouldn't be building it just because people may buy it or not buy it. And I think every product that's now coming out of Playworld is coming out kid tested. And what we learned in that kid testing, the one at least that I participated in, was that there were some unusual things that happened. The way we thought things was going to be used wasn't used that way. And the way that we were hoping things were going to be used didn't get used at all. So the equipment infinitely got better because of having kids on it before we actually rolled it out. And I think and to the semantics, it should be an and, better playgrounds everywhere and play everywhere as well. So thanks for the reminder.
I definitely agree with the and as well too. Our last playground build is in one of our more historic parks, bigger parks in the city, and it's a direct connection to our downtown, our business community. I can see hopscotch being put in place there, bike lanes or more pedestrians walking back and forth. In fact, when the planners sat around a table to design it, that was their idea. How do we bring the people from downtown to this new play space area? So it's definitely an and.
I was going to add too, is I think the challenge is that you're leaving all these play opportunities on the table by only focusing on the playground and this idea of thinking about the routine and just people's everyday lives. How can you intervene to make it an and? And I think in many ways it was overcorrected with the playground in my mind, because and much of it I think to Kaboom, there's so many hundreds of how many thousands of new playgrounds since I met you because of Kaboom, but it's almost like, okay, we've solved this problem by building playgrounds, and actually it's made a big difference on awareness, it made a big difference on places to go, but there's actually a whole bunch of other things that now people have that awareness that you want to go take them there too.
Hi, I'm Karen Lee, and I actually help different cities with healthy built environments. And under Mayor Bloomberg, I was actually the Healthy Built Environment Director for City of New York for 8 years. So a couple of things. One is I think building on the issue of like playgrounds and playability, I think, I'm really glad to hear that people are saying both, because we do have evidence, right, in the health literature showing that access to playgrounds and play spaces does increase active recreation and physical activity, and is also associated with lower weights. I wanted to ask about this question about scale, right, and replication. So basically, when I was still director at the New York City Health Department for Healthy Built Environments, CDC, under federal stimulus, actually gave my program dollars to create this peer-to-peer mentoring program across 15 U.S. cities. Right, and we basically have evaluation results that show that this was very helpful to the different cities. Of course, the federal stimulus ended, and then there went the mentoring program. Even though I have letters from each one of the of those cities saying, "Please continue this. Please continue this." So this issue of, like, for example, how do you create something like the yoga in Times Square and create those pedestrian plazas in pedestrian and public spaces to revitalize the space, increase economic development, increase physical activity. Those are things that can be done, right? Now, I'm doing it right now on a city-by-city basis, helping individual cities who can manage to find the funding to pay me to help them, right? But that mentoring, peer-to-peer mentoring model that CDC funded when they had the stimulus, that's something that I think can be replicated. And it could be replicated across all of our cities, right? So I would pose that, I think, to the folks here who might have opportunity to help and think through how we might refund potentially such a model and recreate such a model. I think, you know, having all the different cities here, playful cities here, as a piece of that is important, but there are multiple other components of that on an ongoing basis that I think, I mean, we can replicate those types of initiatives across the board, but it would require, I think, you know, when we were doing the mentoring, it was, you know, having a group of people who I'd worked with in the city of New York who have that expertise, right, from transport, from planning, from parks, from health, that concomitantly can help other cities to expand. So I don't know if there are comments on that or any ideas. Thanks.
So I'm a big fan of ideas of cities working together, which is why I think it's brilliant that you've brought at least these cities together here. Because what we learned, so we have our signature initiative is an effort called the Integration Initiative. The idea of integrating people, place, and opportunity, different leaders from across the sectors, different types of capital to be able to solve problems. And what we learned from working with those cities for the last bunch of years has been the money was helpful. We brought them some grants and some loans, but actually working together twice a year, bringing teams of people from those cities together for a couple of days was way more effective because then they cross-fertilized without us being in the middle. And I think to the extent that, you know, whether it's this network, Daryl, or other networks of cities that actually have believe that you can make a case that collectively you are going to do stuff faster, better, you know, smarter, cheaper, that network concept is something that philanthropy is currently really hot on. So I think to the extent that you can articulate that and what it would do and why you'd get substantially better results, I think it's a powerful idea.
I mean, I would just add to that point, as an organization that's now talking about playability, we've got to go to the walking movement and biking movement and co-opt them and not try to compete with them or build them down, but build them up and build critical mass with all of us. And so it takes a different type of leader, to be quite honest, and a different type of organization to be collaborators, not competitors. And if somebody can do something better than us, we should actually build it and buy it versus try to do it ourselves. And so I think it's changing the nature of partnerships in a pretty substantial way around flexible organizations, nimble organizations that is kind of just in time versus everybody having their own capacity, which is why later on today you're going to get the benefit and expertise of all these content experts that we brought in because Kaboom doesn't have that ourselves, Karen being one of those. And so I think there's also this different about what's the role of organizations like Kaboom in collaborating versus competing and lifting people up versus tearing people down?
One more question over here.
Thank you. My name is Matt Manley. I'm from the Spartanburg team. And you were talking about changes to the built environment, and you used this example of Washington, D.C. starting on Pennsylvania Avenue and starting big. And I found that very, very interesting. But I wanted to also hear your thoughts on the approach that I've kind of come to, especially when you're looking at communities that are under-resourced, is there's a concept called starting with petunias. And I don't know if y'all are familiar with that or not, but the idea of...
Sounds like a southern concept to this New Jersey boy.
Starting with something small that has a visual impact. And so it's kind of a symbolic thing, but a lot of times we'll do projects that are, you know, the low-hanging fruit. But sometimes places just need to see that change is possible, and they need to see something, you know, visually in their community where they may have lost hope and aren't actively engaged in trying to create change because they don't see it as a possibility. And so that, you know, that's a little bit of a different side to trying to go real big, as y'all described. And I just wanted to hear some of your thoughts on how you get some of the ground level grassroots stuff.
I think you're absolutely right. It's FaceTime and Facebook. We use social media, but we stop knocking on neighbors' doors. And then the second thing is is that we look for instant gratification and instant success versus saying success is doubling from 1 kid playing on the street to 2 kids playing on the street to 4 kids playing on the street to 50 kids playing on the street, and sticking with it long enough to actually see that happen. And so I think that there's got to be this convergence of bottoms up and top down, but also kind of a personal accountability and responsibility that doesn't wait for somebody else to be the solution. I just came from Connecticut, and a teacher was telling me that she wants to be the most playful classroom, but she's waiting for her superintendent to give her permission. And that may never happen unless she takes personal responsibility for building the most playful classroom. And so you all have permission.
We've seen, a famous example is in your city in the mid-'90s where they started getting rid of the graffiti. And it built the confidence of the city that it was a small gesture, but what it was saying is that we're much more confident about our city. And I think things like that go a long ways to starting the rebuilding process in whatever area you're at.
We're finding a lot of artists as well gravitating towards our city. When I saw that bus emblem, to me that was art. Tom, North George Street having a bus stop like that, that's a partnership. We have many artists who want to express themselves that way and allow that sort of creativity to flow. Just sort of any sort of ideas like that, and partners are out there that are willing to help us make our cities better, our communities better, and playful. And I think that's just a perfect example for me. And I wanted to give a shout out to Anna for encouraging me to keep my sneakers on. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Well, thank you all. They keep giving me the signal that we're out of time. I could keep going on. This is fascinating. But thank you all. Thanks to let's all thank our great panel.
Thank you, Jordan.